Okay, so today guys, I have another build, breakdown, walk around video, whatever you'd like to call it. I'm here today with Tobias and his turboed 4Runner. Now this thing is pretty interesting because it is a two-wheel drive turbo 4Runner, which I don't think many of you have seen. So why don't you start off by telling us like where you got this or how much you picked it up for?
So I picked it up just for like a daily driver back and forth to work. I think I paid like 1,800 bucks for it. Yeah, like California spec, so two-wheel drive, 4-cylinder auto. So really,
that's super interesting. That I didn't know these ever came two-wheel drive, because 4Runner, I assumed that the whole idea was that every single one of these was four-wheel drive, but this one is actually a California spec, making it rear-wheel drive.
Yep. So like, I mean, they did a similar thing with Tacomas where you had to get like a pre-runner, but you don't see them come up very often. Still the same engine, transmission, everything else, just no four-wheel drive. So
beautiful. So this is like pretty much your drift 4Runner. If you put this on some
maybe like
some different tires, lowered it,
super tiny ones, and yeah, I had a whole bunch of fab skills I don't have to lower it. It looked like, I don't know, kind of like a Forester probably, but
probably
it. I like it how it is. It hasn't had any problems since we turboed it like 3 years ago. So.
And then the turbo setup on this is pretty interesting, which we'll go into more in depth once we pop the hood. But first off, let's talk about some things on the exterior. You got wheels, tires, some fog lights, and then this is also, I can't remember, did you say it's raised or lowered?
Oh no, it's not. It's like completely stock height. So
I thought you had springs on this at some point.
I replaced it with, well, okay. So originally, I like actually cut a coil out of the back spring so that it would sit level. But then when you load it or put a bunch of shit in it, it ends up like squatting in the back. So now it's actually, I put replacement Moog like OE springs in the back, still on the original springs in the front, just on iBox shocks all the way around.
So there's suspension changes, but it's still relatively the same height as stock?
Yeah, it's basically the exact same height as stock. Or the only difference is really going to be wheel and tire, since the two-wheel drive came with a lot smaller wheel and tire package.
And does this have a LSD or a locking diff, or?
So it didn't. It was like just a 390 open diff, but I bought a locker.
Electronic
or I should say like a Detroit-style locker, supposedly. Whole third member off of eBay that went to 456s instead of the 390 gears, and has a locker in it, which made it much more drivable with the way the boost comes on and how everything kind of just works together. Definitely helps with everyday driving and how it feels, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So, and then you've also got a roof rack and some, this almost looks intentional, the clear coat peeling off, with it just being on like the hood and the roof, but...
No, that's just a happy accident that the original color of the car is close enough to bare metal that it doesn't look completely horrible. Roof rack, I'm pretty sure that's OE Toyota. Came on it when I got it. This guy out here, this is just some part off of eBay. The guy makes parts for like ZJ. It's supposed to be like a Jeep for hood vents. So I just got a couple holes out behind it, screwed it on here. The turbo sits right here, so just trying to get at least some heat out of the engine bay.
Yeah, because the turbo setup does get pretty hot, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You've gone through 3-4 manifolds at this point?
Oh, it's on the third manifold.
Yep.
But it's on the very first, like, $180 eBay turbo, so hopefully I'm not jinxing myself right now, but it's held up really well.
Yep, and then are these stock headlights?
So at one point, I actually had someone blow a stop sign in front of me. Super minor, like, front end accident, so everything's all eBay up front, basically. Like,
that's kind of the theme of the build. It's eBay and Amazon.
Amazon.
I think there's one name brand part on this, if I remember you telling me.
Yeah, pretty much, like maybe 2 or 3 if you start getting into things like the lights on the front. But yeah, these are just eBay, like, blacked out headlight housings and corner markers. They came with these clear turn signals.
Yep.
eBay bumper skin, top and bottom. Let's see. Yeah, the fog lights came off of Amazon, like you said. And other than that, the only thing else from that accident is this little wave in the fender, but
oh, I didn't really notice that.
Didn't get hit too bad, so.
Well, that's good to hear. And then, did you tint these windows, or did these come stock tinted?
So from what I understand, the guy I bought it from worked for like a audio and tint place, so these are all tinted when I got it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So I think that's it for the exterior.
Oh, you can do wheels and tires.
Wheels and tires. What wheels and tires do you have on here?
So yeah, again, eBay wheels. Got some Vulcan all-terrains, and then the big thing is the two-wheel drive came with smaller disc brakes up front.
Yeah.
And they had a bad habit of warping pretty much instantly anytime you went anywhere. So now this is a setup off of a first-gen Tundra.
Including caliper?
Yeah, I believe it's actually like a power stop like kit. Not for the 4Runner, just for a first-gen Tundra. So it's the rotor, comes with a new caliper, and pads, the whole thing.
Cool.
The only thing you have to do to fit on here is just trim the dust shield, and everything else folds
so
up.
the actual caliper just mounts factory location?
Yeah, everything just goes on just like it was meant to be there, and you end up with a whole lot better braking feel. And I've had much more luck not warping rotors.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you have anything done to the rear for brakes, or?
No, that is drum brakes all the way.
Beautiful.
So.
Okay, let's pop the hood and show off the turbo setup. Which, if you guys can't see, there is a intercooler peeking out of the bottom here, and that's really the only giveaway that this thing is turboed. And the blow-off valve noises.
Yeah.
Because this thing makes some pretty crazy stu-tus.
Yeah, it can, if you get it loaded up just right.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was a much better fabricator, someone could probably put that, behind the bumper and really hide it.
Mm-hmm. Bang! Oh, my shadow's in the way. Boom! So, this is the 4-cylinder with a turbo, and this isn't a kit, right?
Yeah, so there's like one company that'll sell you a kit. I didn't want to spend that much money.
Yep.
And I kind of just cobbled everything together from where I could get it. Like, the whole intercooler piping kit is all a CX Racing standard intercooler kit, same place the intercooler came from.
Is this just a generic kit, or is it for a 4Runner?
No, just a generic kit.
Okay.
So, spend way too much time on eBay and Amazon buying like different degrees of silicone adapters, and way too much time like cutting pipes to fit. But other than that, yeah, it's all just a generic kit that has been more or less made to fit the vehicle.
Yeah, and I think, isn't there also a supercharger kit for this engine?
Yeah, you could get a supercharger, which would have been much, much simpler because it just goes in place of the intake manifold, add a drive belt, and go about your life. So.
But this makes cooler noises, and it's custom. So this is the eBay Turbo, right?
Yeah, so this is an internally gated turbo that they would sell in like a kit for like, say, like a Civic.
Yep.
I'm sure they say it's capable of making some sort of horsepower that more than what it makes here. But yeah, so it's just a eBay manifold. It's like a T3, T4 turbo. It's just oil cooled. Again.
So there's no coolant lines running to this?
Yeah, no coolant lines running to it. Makes it a little more simple, especially trying to deal with plumbing and putting it in when you don't know what you're doing.
So all you need is oil lines.
All you need is oil
manifold.
lines.
And then the one name brand part.
Oh, no, there's like, there's a couple. Yeah, so that's back from Subaru land when I had a WRX. That's a holdover. The other name brand parts down on the other side is there's a Greddy.
Yeah, there's a Greddy blow-off valve right down there. And so
the big thing you had to do, and like when I first did it, I tried running the MAF before the turbo down here, and found that if you got into a situation where you got it loaded up on boost a little bit, around 30 miles an hour, let off the gas, it'd kill the vehicle. From what I could figure out, just too turbulent of air around the MAF. So I relocated it into the charge piping, and it's about the same distance from the throttle as it would have been on the factory setup when the airbox was over here. Okay. And as soon as I relocated the MAF into the charge piping, drives completely normal. Drives just like stock.
So that's pretty interesting. So normal turbo setups, you have your MAF or your MAP like before your actual turbo, and then in between like your intake cone and your turbo, but this MAF is located after all of the piping, right before the throttle body. So piping comes around here, down, and then did you drill any holes through the body to get your piping routed?
I might have like beat on it with a hammer a little bit, but no, it comes down here with this very well done brace, kind of goes straight down, and then I think if you come over to this side, it uses a 92-degree silicone elbow. And
I don't know if you guys can really see that, but it comes down kind of near the fender well, and then obviously in front to the cooler. Actually, we're doing this backwards, and then back
if you want to start
over here. And then, what about the downpipe? Is the downpipe a custom job, or?
Yeah, if you want to call it that. I mean, I made it work. Used some extra like scrap exhaust and kind of cut to fit and stuck it together with a welder.
Yep.
Good enough to do what it's supposed to, and yeah,
and
seems
then
to be holding up.
You also have an oil catch can, which when you're running a turbo setup, you pretty much always want to run a catch can just because you get so much more blow by, right?
Yeah, especially because, I mean, this was a 200,000 mile 4Runner, and I've done exactly nothing to the motor. So,
Yep.
I mean, I replaced the valve cover gasket.
Ooh, big mods.
Yep, and run like 1 step colder spark plugs in it.
Yeah.
But that is it. And yeah, the catch can sits actually where this bracket is for the factory EGR, which is long since gone. So
Yep.
I had a nice little extra spot for a catch can.
Oh, it's perfect. So the EGR is deleted, and then both of these lines come off of the valve cover, back around to the catch can, and then the catch can routes over to
charcoal canister. And this is really unnecessary, but
Yep.
I mean, it's bolted here, so there's a
and then it runs
filter.
all the way over here, and then there's just a breather right here, but you don't really need that. You could just put the breather there.
Yep. I'm like, some people would have just run like a little filter off of here and one off of here, and you'd be good to go. So.
Yep. And now we'll get into the point, or to the part I'm sure you guys are all wondering about, is how is this turbo setup work? How is there's no engine management, there's no ECU, there's no fuel management, it's a stock ECU. How does that work?
So I actually ended up going down this path because I worked with a guy who had a 3.4 that was supercharged, and we realized that you do nothing. You just bolt the supercharger on. On his, he changed injectors and run colder plugs, and then the ECU just compensates. And found out that like the ECU for this will do basically the same thing. If you're on the supercharger, nothing, you just go about your life and drive like normal. Some people they've said you need to run things like, they have like MAF signal clamps for like trying to get a more stable MAF signal, or like eliminate spikes that come with boost and vacuum and all those fun things. But I've had good luck running it just the way it is. The sketchiest part about it is if you roll into boost really slowly, while the ECU is in closed loop, it will try really, really, really hard to keep air-fuel ratios at 14:7:1, which is pretty lean under boost. But as soon as it goes into open loop, it'll pull right down on wide open throttle to like 10.5, 11:1. Stock injectors, just as a drop-in fuel pump.
Yep, so this has a drop-in fuel pump and then slight 1 step colder spark plugs.
Yep.
And everything else is completely stock as related to like what you would normally do to a turbo setup. Normally you would have either a standalone ECU, or you'd have like a piggyback ECU or something to be able to change the fuel map so that you get more fuel under boost.
Yeah. And
Because more air plus more fuel equals more boom, but if you have not enough fuel, then you start to run lean, and that's when you start to have like ringland failure and stuff melt because it's not getting the proper cooling. But what's super cool is that, like to why I said, these older Toyota ECUs will just figure it out. The map goes past.
yeah,
and
for whatever reason, like it can handle more volume of air from the MAF, reading up to, most people say like around 8 psi, which I run like 7 or 8 psi, and
that's just off of the spring and the wastegate. And
so the internal wastegate spring is actually a 5 psi spring, because when I was reading about it, I figured like better safe than sorry. Why run it at like 8 if that's the most you can do? And then I ended up putting the manual boost controller on and turning it back up till I got to 7 or 8 psi, because it's a slippery slope. But
yep, so this little guy you can just turn and you get more boost, and then the ECU will just figure it out.
yeah, pretty much.
And then, as you guys saw in the B-roll, there's also a boost gauge and a wideband in there, which you can obviously monitor to see if stuff starts to go very wrong, which it hasn't.
It hasn't. I'm like, when I went through the last manifold, you can see that you're not building boost right, but you kind of get used to it, and then you fix it, and you're like, oh, it makes boost again. So.
And the manifold setup on this is pretty interesting. You've done this multiple times, so you're a veteran when it comes to eBay manifolds. If anybody tries to do this, why don't you tell them the secret sauce to getting these not to crack?
I don't know the secret sauce. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on.
The third one. Leak, I should say, because you've done some weird stuff with like multiple layers of copper and gasket. And
Actually mounting it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you look up like a turbo manifold for this engine on eBay, it gives you this guy down here. There's also one that looks a little better put together that comes out of Australia, and there is one company that makes a super legit CNC one, but I still have to buy at least 2 more eBay manifolds to break even on the price there. So.
Yeah.
But I believe that the flange on those is actually set up for, I want to say, the 2.4 liter that's in like the two-wheel drive Tacomas, because the bottom two holes on the manifold don't line up quite right, so you have to slot a couple holes. And then I just run some of the Permatex like copper, ultra, seal, silicone on both sides of an MLS gasket, and that seems to be enough to make up for probably the less than perfect flange that comes on the manifolds.
Yep. And then I remember you telling me the exact same setup with the silicone gasket. Silicone was also done to mount the turbo to the manifold to prevent leaks. Yeah,
just a little extra insurance. And like when I first did it, I used some of the cheaper gaskets that came with the manifold, and they blew out in like 500 miles. So after I went through a few of those, I ended up at this process because I got tired of taking the manifold off and on and off and on. So seems to work.
And then this is pretty cool here. I remember this is a recent addition to help prevent manifolds from cracking, which has kind of been the whole...
Yeah, so the hope is that maybe this will take up a little the stress or weight of the turbo as it's bolted to the manifold. There's nothing that really supports the turbo but the manifold. And both times when I've had the manifold fail, it actually cracked like around the number 2 runner, which is the one that's closest to sort of like where the flange comes off of the header. So I think...
So this is just a little turnbuckle and then a little rubber bushing, essentially.
Yeah, an isolator. It's all like hardware store special. It remains to be seen if it will help or not. But
yeah, that's
it's not really a big dollar investment. It's like $6.42 or something. So nothing too crazy.
Okay. Let's take a look at the interior now and see the gauges, the wideband, the boost controller, or the boost gauge.
Yeah.
Because I remember you telling me you mounted these pretty specially. Why don't you?
So originally, I tried to mount them down lower, kind of in front of where the shifter is.
Yeah.
But you'd find that it's not very convenient to look at. And there is, I believe, a couple options. You can go the standard like A-pillar gauge or get one that goes around the clamshell for the steering wheel. But in these 4Runners and Tacomas of the same time, they have a pretty useless cup holder that's right above your radio. So I ended up getting a little bracket mount and kind of modified the cup holder to mount my gauges right there. And it works great. It's right in your eye line. And then the second half of that is there's a guy, again, on eBay that sells these cup holders as a kit that you can put down here. That way you don't have your drinks above your radio and all that.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. And those can really only hold like Red Bull cans and stuff like that.
They can hold as much as you want them to, but that's a scary proposition. And then actually in here too, the shifter, kind of a random thing, but that's actually the shifter out of a 4-wheel drive because it looks about 1,000,000 times better than what comes in the car, which is, I'm pretty sure, the same shifter that would come in like an early 90s Camry. It's about yay tall and has a nice funky
it's got
like
the big
top
thing with the thumb on the side, right?
Yeah,
so that'd be like a first-gen Highlander as well.
So then, I bought a 4-wheel drive like shifter thing and disassembled it all and figured out that I had to cut a bunch of things and change some springs in order to get the overdrive switch or overdrive cancel switch to work and to get the spring release to work from a top button. But got it all working and straightened out, and it looks, I don't know, like actually the gauges and the shifter are a couple of my favorite like little changes.
That's pretty funny because that's something that literally nobody other than you would ever recognize.
Like maybe people who like it might throw people off thinking that it's a 4-wheel drive, but yeah, no, that's purely for myself.
You'd have to first know that this is a 2-wheel drive, and then you have to know that that's not supposed to be in it.
Yeah. So I mean, but the other one is just not a fan of how it looked. So did what we could with it.
That's pretty awesome.
And then there's I mean, put a stereo in it, but not a whole lot in the interior is not original.
Yeah, it's great. So there's like no cracks in the dash, and you got all the door cards, and all the pieces are there.
Oh yeah,
which is beautiful. And then back here, it's just
quiet hinges.
Yep, everything's there. It's perfect. And so this is just the turbo 4Runner daily that works. It's so reliable.
Yeah. Thankfully, it hasn't seemed to impact reliability, and I don't really do a whole lot with it besides just cruise back and forth to work. And if you need to go out to the lake on the weekend,
you can put paddle boards on top. Yep.
Yeah, paddle boards on top. They're in the back right now, all deflated, but yeah, so far so good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any other questions about this setup, Tobias's Instagram will be in the description if you have any questions for him. Again, we've pretty much gone over the entire turbo setup and how that actually works, running a stock ECU with a turbo on a Toyota 4Runner. Thank you so much to Tobias for coming out. We're going to go head out to Bonneville now and get some B-roll and some rollers, so that will probably be in another episode, but again, thank you.
All right, yeah, for sure.
Make sure to like and subscribe. Peace.